Hi, I'm Dr. Paul VanValin. I'm the president and founder of Eden Counseling and Consulting, also president and founder of Eden Leaders Institute. And this is one of our series of presentations that we've been making now for over a year and a half, directed to leaders, both in the marketplace, pastoral leaders, government leaders, how to live well, personally, professionally, and today we're talking about efficiency and impact. How do we accomplish everything there is that needs to be done? So just by way of brief introduction, if I can get this to move, there we go. Preacher's kid, married for a good long while, and soon it'll be a bigger number than 39. We have been doing what we've been doing since 95. And I've been working with leaders ever since 1987. So I have a number of years of experience working with both coaching and consulting with leaders. The Institute exists to help develop you and your mission, including family and community. I'm just referencing that we have third Thursday online leaders training. Today happens to be the fourth Thursday because we were doing an intensive last week, which is bringing leaders in to work with them as a team. And so consistent with today's topic, how to keep margin in place. Sometimes things need to be restructured, rescheduled in order to live a sane and healthy life. You can go to YouTube and look at our past training, and you can contact us directly for coaching and consulting needs. Today we're going to work on looking at margin, the white space on either side of a page, so you can write some notes. If you fill the page, there's no room for anything extra. To live without margin is very stressful. And so we're going to look at a particular exercise that has been really impactful in my own life, and we're going to take a look at that together. And you can get a copy of that. At the end, I'll give you some contact points so you can get a copy of this and look at it and work on it yourself. So I'm going to show you a video by Brian Regan. He's one of my favorite comics. So we're gonna look at that all together right now.
I'm wearing new contacts. I just had my prescription changed after 6 years. You ever wait that long? Then you get new lenses. You're like, man, I could have been saying things. How can instantly improved vision not be at the top of your to-do list? I'll see tomorrow. I don't have time. I don't have time to see clearly. No, I don't. No, I can't do that. You see what's on my desk?
I don't have time to see clearly. Do you see what's on my desk? So that's a pretty comical view of a very real problem. Don't have time to get done what is needed to get done. And often self-care is the first thing that we sacrifice as we're moving toward mission completion. So what are the barriers to impact? Or another way of looking at this is efficient efficacy, to be efficacious, to be effective efficiently. What are barriers to that? And we may not know how to do it. We may be inexperienced in whatever new thing we're trying to do. Our own personal stress will get in the way. We become less efficient when we're stressed, even though we're trying to pile more and more on. So 3 things I tell all leaders: you need to understand your anger, anxieties, and addictions. If you understand what they are and how to manage them, we all have them. If you manage them well, you're going to be more efficacious. Managing your own limits, knowing when to stop, when to say no. My favorite response to a request is no. I don't always say it right away, but I think it. Someone says, hey, can you help me with this? I'll think no. And then I'll think, can I find somebody else to do it? And if I can find anyone else to do it, then I say no. I only want to be doing the things that I am being called to do, that I personally am the best or only person to do it. Sometimes I will delegate a task that I could have done more efficiently and better, but I'm not going to do it because it's not on my to-do list for the day, and they would benefit from learning how to do it. So learning to say no. Having lack of resources, and any new organization is going to have this. You don't have enough time, health, funds, or manpower. Now, I threw health in there because health is a resource, and managing our health is as important as managing our wealth. Lack of clarity of mission, so there's just inefficiency because we're scattered. We're not pulling it together. And everybody goes through periods of time when we're inefficient, don't have the resources. But I really believe that if we're following our call, we're we're gathering wise counsel as we go, we will get it done. We'll figure out how to do this. So one of the things I just want to reference is what I call the control pendulum. Whenever things are going back and forth, I like a pendulum model. So a pendulum just swings like this, and on this side over here, we would have doing it all myself. No one else can do it better than me. I don't have any other help. I'm doing everything on my own. And over here we have I've given it all away, and we'll flip back and forth. I go through periods of time where I'm just inundated with things, so I disperse them to other staff, but I don't really keep enough management, and it kind of gets out of hand. Then I grab it all back and do it myself. So there's this pendulum that we go back and forth on. And what we want to do is build a good infrastructure of our organization with all the members playing to their strengths. We would really like to develop organizations where people can be specialized in what they do. Sometimes that requires growing it to a certain position so we can have that, or growing people so that they can become these really important entities to our organization. And then we define their standards of performance very clearly so they know when they're doing a good job and we can manage it well. Last month, we had my friend Tom Nolan teach on some of these issues. He showed us the 6x6, which was used. He got exposed to it through Bill Hybels, who's a very influential leader in our world. And I've been adapting those same tools. So building an infrastructure, putting people in the right place, the right job with the right training, and then keeping it all together with good oversight. That's where we'd love to be. Part of managing with margin is you have the capacity for rest and recovery, not just personally, but also organizationally. What stresses, particularly the top leader, stresses the organization. And this is a basic principle of stress management. We can have the stuff that it takes to make it through something, but unless there's some rest and recovery, we're eventually going to get drained and vulnerable, and our cracks are going to show, and the people that we don't want to be, we start becoming. And time is an important factor here. So if you have a big project going on, are you planning rest and recovery? If your organization is going through a lot, are you planning a time of rest and celebration perhaps? So these principles of prevention that include strategic planning for rest, time, knowing yourself well enough, knowing your organization, what helps us recover. And I'll share a recent story that you'll see that my organization needed respite from a staff person. And once we moved that staff person out, there was like this restful new energy that came in. In terms of personal life, exercise, food, mindfulness activity, where you're focused in just on one thing, and then a weekly Sabbath, which is a basic biblical concept, a monthly getaway. So a Sabbath is a weekly experience of time apart, time for rest and recovery. A monthly getaway, if you're married, might be you and your spouse taking a day in addition to Sabbath and just having some fun, or taking a day yourself and extended study or whatever it is that you need. Semi-annually, non-working holidays and vacations, and a big vacation once a year. Scheduled strategic times for rest and recovery. It took me a long time, but now if I have a really busy week, I take a couple days and carve out free time. I didn't used to do that. I used to just plow through. Age maybe got the best of me. So I don't have time. That's what I always hear. Don't have time to see. That was Brian Reagan. Don't have time to rest. Don't have time to plan. Don't have time to recover. Don't have time to study. Don't have time to prepare. The list goes on and on. We want to see that change. So just an illustrative story. Eden is going through some changes. My organizations are going through some changes. A key individual got into a health situation, and we needed to move her out. While I was hoping she would recover to be able to continue her role, it became kind of caustic and toxic, the environment. Things not getting done, other people having demands made of them. So we were dealing with a really negative environment for us. We usually have a positive environment. And so I was pondering this, what do I do? Because this individual had critical information that no one else had. And one of the problems was I had hired an individual that she was to train, and it hadn't happened. So here we are sitting and got really good manpower. They're starting to get burned out because lack of clarity, lack of smoothness, you should have done it this way, just a lot of negativity, and a key individual that couldn't or wouldn't, I wasn't sure which, disseminate this information that was needed. So I needed to know, so what's it going to cost me to transition? And I let this go on for too long because I just didn't know what to do until it finally dawned on me I knew a consultant. There at the fourth bullet, I knew a consultant I could hire who could help me sort this out. And this is something that we need to always look at. If I'm stuck, what will get me unstuck? So hiring a consultant is a great idea. I brought her in, she reviewed systems, and she said this and this has to change, and we did it. And so we're in the process now of making change. So we still have to, like going down through this checklist, we have to set realistic goals for several things. Where do we want to end up? What are the what are the stepping stones? What, short-term goals and so forth. What's a realistic time for transition? Because as a leader, I don't want to be leading people into a false place. You lose credibility as soon as you are saying, well, we'll be done by in 6 months, and 6 months comes and we're full of excuses. So we do the best we can to really realistically guide people, give them realistic expectations, and there's less stress. We have to look at our resources. And in my case, I've had to often fire somebody to make space for growth. And there's a really, really good book, Necessary Losses. I'll reference that at the end, by Henry Cloud. In fact, we'll talk about it in a minute. So we have to deal with our losses in order to grow. The pruning principle from John 15. And then we have to train as needed. And this is where I find many small organizations falling short. Not necessarily big organizations. When I was in the Army, they knew how to train, and we trained and we retrained, and that was great. But in my small organization, where we just have enough manpower to keep things going, training is often an issue, and it may be for your organization as well. So just to review my own story for some of you that haven't heard this, the most difficult times of my life have been due to running this company that I now run. Early on, I didn't know what I didn't know. There were some administrative problems. I went through a 3-year window of significant stress and challenges. In 2008, it was different kinds of losses, but also having to release somebody that had been with me for years, some health issues piled up too high, and I fell into a negative state again. So in each of these situations, there was an opportunity to learn from it, grow from it. And in 2012, I hired my friend Tom Nolan, who spoke last month as a coach. And we met, it was very intensive coaching, more intense than most coaching experiences. So we met for an hour a week for a year, and then got together face to face for at least one day. But since he lived in Long Island and I down in Virginia Beach, it was really a weekend. And so once a month, we planned a weekend together, brought our spouses, they were all friends, and we're all part of the consultations. Becky benefited tremendously from being part of this journey. And Tom's wife, Linda, has a lot of organizational experience and insight, really a great dynamic. God really provided a wonderful thing for us. In the course of doing that work with Tom, he presented several models for me to work with. One of them the 6x6 and the needs and values surveys. And he introduced last month the creating capacity by eliminating low value activities, which we're going to look at specifically today. So we're going to look at that today. So out of this process, you're going to hear my story of new insight, new changes, and I am way more efficient, way happier than I was in 2012 when I first hired Tom. I was actually doing much better just a year and a half after that. So I feel like I've been relatively stress-free for me, relatively worry-free, with almost no anxiety. And I come from a long line of anxious, perfectionist, hard-driven people. And I really think it's taken these kind of rough periods of time and the wisdom of others to help me craft a human being that I like living in my own skin way better than I did before. So Necessary Endings, I referenced this book. He does a masterful job. Henry Cloud is a very good author. He now is consulting with very large organizations, making a ton of money. He made his first $1 billion with the Boundaries series that he wrote with Townsend. So Townsend and Cloud, those Boundaries books, some of you know about that. But I think his best books are Necessary Endings and Boundaries for Leaders, which I thought was going to be a rehash of his old boundary stuff. It's not. It's really good stuff for leaders. So those are two really good books. And we're talking about creating capacity by cutting low value activities. Something's got to go. And so we go to John 15, the metaphor of the vineyard and the vine. I am the true vine, my Father's the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that bears fruit, he prunes it so it may bear fruit. In other words, every branch gets cut. And so if we use that metaphor and apply it to the physical body, there's a lot of pain there. But there's also always pain when we're pruning our organization or our calendar. Something's got to go. And so this is about trying to decide what should go so there can be growth. How do I make that decision? And so we're going to look at this, and we're going to look at heart, impact, growth, and obligation. I'm going to pull up the form itself. I'm going to walk us through a little bit. Let me just take a peek here and see who's in. We now have some participants, and you may want to pull up the form that we sent out. Hopefully you got it in the email. And there's a chat bar, and I'm going to try to leave that open. It's just as far as a presenter, it begins crowding my screen, but I'm going to take a look. And if you wish to make a comment or ask a question, please do. We got some of that last month. That was great. And I actually want to walk you through this, so feel free to let me know if it's clear, not clear, okay? So I'm going to take a second here and find my creating capacity. And so here we go. This is the actual form that was sent to you. If you have the one with modifications, you'll have down here in the lower right /hours. I sent it Maribel 2 kind of late yesterday. I'd made some changes, just some editing. And what I've done is just begin filling out some samples we could talk about. But let's just take a look at the directions here. So, and I'm just going to read it just so we're all kind of on the same page. I'm trying to get a thing that's on my screen because I'm presenter there. I just moved it. So margin's about having excess time, energy, and money left over at the end of the week, month, and year as you wish. I would say at the end of the day also, at the end of the day, depending on what's going on. So I would say, let's say day, so margin daily, weekly, monthly, and annually. To use as you wish. This excess capacity enables you to begin to discover the opportunities around us and to have the resources, emotionally, physically, financially, spiritually, to address them. When you're just stuck in a rut, you don't look above the rut, you don't see what the possibilities are. Margin enables us to do life at a pace that lets us listen to God's calling and direction. In what area of your life do you need to work at opening up margin? And so the answer to that question, how do I know if I need to open up margin? Am I anxious? Am I irritable? Am I pressed for time? Am I always late? Am I having difficulty with my own motivating my team? Any of these things might suggest time to look at cutting something up. So there are 2 steps to creating margin. The author writes, eliminating the low value things from your life and overlapping the high value items. And I'm going to give you samples of both in my own experience. So here's one model to help you eliminate lesser priority items from your life. Using the grid below in the left-hand column, list all the activities you regularly allocate time to. I'm going to push this up so you can see this. Then across the 4 columns, score those activities based on how valuable they are to you. Now, what I'm going to do is jump right from here into one that I did in 2012 so that you can see, come on, where are you? Here we go. So that you can see what I worked on. And I'm doing it a little differently now. So I've tried to edit this old form to look more like what I gave you. But what I did last week for myself is way more elaborate than this, and I'll share that with you too. So you have heart. How do you enjoy it? Does it bring life to you? Impact. Is it impacting some significant factor around you? And the author suggests eternal impact. Really, does this have long-standing value? Growth. Are you growing and learning? Back to me. An obligation. Do you have to do this? And if you don't do it, so obligation. A high obligation would mean if I don't do it, something's really going to fall apart. So this is me in 2012. I was counseling, if you can follow this, I was counseling, activity on the left, up to 55 hours a week on the far right. You see it? I'm moving my cursor. So counseling, 55 hours. So most of my time was spent one-on-one, family, couples, and I was losing heart. It didn't have a 4 or 5. I was doing so much of it, and the reason I was losing heart was there were other things that I wanted to do more of. And those are the 5s and 4s. So I do believe it had impact on the lives and on generations. I believe that what I do affects generations, so it has good impact. I was not growing much because it was kind of, after doing something for 30 years, you kind of have it down. But it was high obligation. At least I perceived it that way because it was both financially, reputationally, and organizationally required of me. So I was doing, so the score, this number here, if you can see my cursor, is 15, which is just moderate. But a big chunk of my time. So exercise, looking at exercise. Second line, far left exercise. Love it. Impact on my health, it would be a 5, but on the rest of the world, not that much. But if I were to fall out because of sickness, so I gave it a 2, you could give it a 3. Growth, 4 might even have been generous in terms of the impact exercise had on my growth. And I felt it was really important, so I gave it a 5, even though in my week, I didn't give it a 5. Do you follow how that goes? High obligation, but we don't really do it. Don't have time. So I was averaging, this averages a 16, a little higher than my actual work, and I was only giving it 4 hours a week. would love to have given it more. Teaching. Now, this has to do back then with we have students in Eden, and they don't back then didn't really contribute much financially. I loved it. I felt it had huge impact on generations of counselors. I grew tremendously from it. It was a low obligation, so it got a 17. So you can see how these numbers can kind of be the same, but you have to look at the rows to make sense of why are they what they are. And I was doing about 3 hours a week. TV, watching television. I couldn't say it really was all that passionate about it, nor did it have any impact, nor did it provide any growth, nor was it an obligation. And yet I spent 9 hours a week doing it. It was just sort of escapist. Sometimes Becky and I would do a date watching TV, that sort of thing. But it really wasn't a high priority. Only got a 5. And so overall would simply be, I don't know if you're seeing this when we get rid of stuff that's come popping in here. And supervising students, again, not real high, give it a 13, 3 hours a week. Networking, which is marketing, developing, pretty high, not much time spent on it. That needed more time, from my opinion. Study, which I love, not much time. I think I needed more time for that. Just taking care of my hygiene, that's just bathing and dressing and stuff like that, home maintenance. So I looked at that and I said, okay, so what am I going to cut out to be able to do what I really loved? Because I had a vision for working more with leaders. We were doing it, but I just wanted to do it more. So I don't even have coaching and consulting on here, which I do have now. So I looked at that and pondered it. My wife did this, and she said, you know what? I could cut back on FaceTime. I could cut back on TV. I could cut, she listed several things that were of low impact, low growth, low obligation. Yeah, she could cut it out, no problem. I looked at this and I said, well, I could gain a few hours from TV. Don't want to give up teaching. And so we processed this, the 4 of us, Tom and Linda, Becky and I. I'm wrestling with it. And I don't think in a meeting I came up with the big aha. But as I prayed about it and as I just considered this, I decided I have to give up counseling. I may have announced it in that meeting, but I didn't know how to do it. I said, I have to cut back on counseling. It's 55 hours a week. However, it is the main way that revenue is brought in, both to me personally and to my organization. What do I do? So there is a happy ending to this story. So these were the things I said. I did not, just for your notice, I totaled 95. There's 168 hours in a week. I did not explore administration time, sleep, socializing, commuting, and other hobbies in this mix. So I had 73 hours not accounted for in this grid, and theoretically, sleep should have been a big part of that. And so, you can see I just was running short on time to be able to grow. I'm very interested in my own growth. So TV and counseling were the only 2 I thought I could do anything with. Didn't know what to do, but I knew if I could reduce the counseling I was doing and increase, we call them higher capacity clients in our consultation, leaders, people who could make change quickly, who would influence influencers, that I would have a bigger impact, probably would grow more myself. And so I wanted to get more into executive coaching, and something I was calling faithful leaders back then. We've since retagged it Eden Leaders Institute. So the upshot is, it took me, here's the happy ending. I began just cutting back. I had to go by faith. I don't know what I'm going to do. I believe I'm supposed to do this. So I stopped taking new clients, just stopped. And so by attrition, got down to 40, 30, 25. And then once I got down to about 30, I had 10, 15 hours more to think, plan, network within my organization. And I came up with a plan that has been really, really useful. So I had to cut back on the counseling in order to grow myself. And you'll see what I'm doing now is what I want to do. But I also was able to overlap supervision, teaching, and something that falls under counseling but isn't on this grid because it wasn't on my radar, assessments, testing. And so what I've developed is a training program that brings revenue into the company by training all of my students who are in psychology, social work, and counseling to participate in a testing program. And I won't go through the boring details, but the upshot is that my time with my students' time is bringing in 30% more revenue into the organization, and I have 50% more time available to other activities. And so this was a result of Tom and Linda and Becky and I working, praying, God revealing some things, and I can honestly say my typical week is much more satisfying. I wasn't unhappy or dissatisfied. I'm just much more so. I don't want to be average. That's not my goal. So I'm much happier. I'm much more fulfilled. And I believe that what I'm doing, the proportion of my time that is impacting generations is bigger. So that's the happy ending. But I had to be willing to just cut. I didn't know where it was going. I just had to trust and cut. And then once I had time to think, and so there are times when we have to take a sabbatical, or we get sick, we have to take time off, or we need a vacation, we have to take it and maybe spend some of that time thinking and meditating and maybe doing this exercise and taking a look. So I wanted us to look at that, my example of it, and now I want to go back and where did you go? I want to go back to here. So I just put some samples in here. I want us to walk through this a little bit, take a little time with for instance, kind of person. And I would like you to pull yours out. And if you're doing this online, stop, look up our resource, and do this with me. So let's say we have different people in the audience. Sometimes we have people who are in pastoral ministry roles. We have people in marketplace roles. We may have people in governmental roles, or you may be an entrepreneur. You have small company. You're the leader. So let's say you're a pastor preaching preparation. In the best of times, a pastor might say a 5. However, I've talked with pastors who, in the worst of times, it was a 2 or a 1. Because they're getting burned out, not getting creative ideas, and with impact. Hopefully, if a pastor is providing strong messages to a listening crowd, that would be a 5, providing tremendous growth for the individual as well as the organization. It would be high obligation, and so the ideal would be that it would be 25 score, like the highest, and I don't know how much pastors typically spend. Let's say this one spends 15 hours. So it's a big chunk of the week, but it's a big part of their primary role. Now, in difficult times, and with this kind of thing, it'd usually be the heart that's starting to drop off. Later, with the heart dropped off, you're going to see lower impact and with less motivation to study, lower growth, but obligation always stays high. So in the worst of times, an individual might rate this as an 11. Huge difference between 25 and 11. And another thing you can do with this is just as you do it, really genuinely ask yourself, how do I feel about this? What kind of impact is it having, and so on. Be really honest with yourself. So let's say a business person, just to show how you might do some of these, has to do marketing. And there's a variation of this for those of you that are pastors as well in terms of your own development. So it's combination of planning your marketing, implementing your marketing. Let's say you love this, and it's a 5. But the way you're doing it and the amount of time that you have to spend on it is limited. But you still give it a 5 because if you did more of it, it does have impact. And you pretty much know what you're doing, but you're creative, so there's a growth component, and you have to do it, but you're only spending 3 hours a week. This is what happens to entrepreneurs with this. I could easily score this. So I did this wrong. So it's 3 hours a week, but the overall score is 19. So it has high value, high impact, but I'm only spending 3 hours on it. I actually added the hours piece as I was deciding to teach this today. I thought that's a particularly important component. So here the guy would be saying, or the woman would be saying, how do I get more time for this? And that hence the nature of this exercise. Training staff often goes down. And let's say the person really likes it, has high value. It has tremendous impact on their organization at least. They know what they're doing, but they still like to be creative, and it has high obligation. And so I'm going to paint this as a good scenario. Let's say the person's job is to develop other people. So for a pastor, this would be developing elders, developing lay leaders, developing staff. For an entrepreneur, developing your team. For a governmental leader, the heads of agencies. And let's say you're really devoting a good bit of time to it. You're spending 10 hours a week, and this is something that is a 15, 19. So that would show good balance. It's important, and I am devoting the right kind of time to it, and so on. So you may be involved in sales, and there may be other activities, fundraising, and so forth. Then we move into personal stuff. I showed you exercise. I'm also a musician. You may have outlets that you need to develop for yourself. Again, almost everybody in our culture needs to look at TV, family time, marriage time, prayer and study time. So these things, you would go as it follows. So like prayer. Um, uh, let's say the person is not a prayer warrior, but they think it's important and they actually do benefit from it. So they rated a 4. We have to be careful not to fall into stereotypes and rate these things as if we should be doing them this way. We need to be honest with ourselves. And so let's say the impact right now is low. I'm just not seeing any benefit from it. Don't think I'm growing, but it has high obligation. This would be an area, for example, and I'm spending 2 hours a week. So I intentionally crafted this way so you'd see an example that maybe the time itself is giving it a low grade. So having a 13, when maybe in my faith I really wish I did more. I know I would benefit in my spirit and my mind and my body, but I'm only spending 2 hours, but it's all I have time for. Maybe I'm spending 15 minutes, 10 minutes a day, something like that. So then again, we'd be going back and trying to find other things. Once you have done your scores, you take a look and see what are the low value exercises or roles that you can eliminate. And what I would add is another line, which I didn't, but you might want to just type this in. What high value activities do I need to increase? Because that's really how I use this. I began looking at saying, okay, this is really, really important. But if I already know what I need to increase, it's not a guessing game. Maybe I just need to leave space and be creative and consult my consultants and let God speak to know what to do with it. But most of the time in my life, I know what I need to be doing more of. I want to do it. I just don't have time to do it. And that's the dilemma. So you could ask yourself and make lists, as I did in the other exercise, so that we have a list of these are our activities. So what I did this week was I made 3 grids. And I didn't do this for you all. I didn't want it to sound too crazy or complicated, but I took this box that you see right here, activity on the left, total hours on the right, and I copied the box and I pasted it 3 times. And so I did work, personal, and then ministry, because I'm engaged in nonprofit and for-profit activity. And so it's pretty extensive. And I still can, and as I look at it, I'm really way more contented with now than in 2012. I really think that I have with God's help and my advisors' help, and so on. But there's still more that needs to be done, and I still am not as efficient as I need to be with, particularly training of my staff and administrating Eden. So I'm looking at it again, and once again, TV is bottom on the totem pole. But I have to get more efficient I'm still spending too much time on 2 other areas. So I'm going to have to take some time and think and consider, how do I delegate more or cut back? And delegation is one of the critical pieces. I was doing a consultation for myself with Jim Buick, who's a very good friend of mine. He is a former vice president of Brunswick, former president of Zondervan Publishing, very influential leader, really wise. And he developed his own coaching model. And I spent a day with him, and it was touched my heart, my mind. And I was early on in developing Eden, and his conclusions were, Paul, you're going to have to delegate out a lot more. You're doing way too much. And I just sort of sat there in a slump, like, yeah, I got got no resources. But I made a point 10 years later of writing to him saying, Jim, it took 10 years, but I really appreciate your input, because it just took a while for me to develop to the place where I could delegate some of this stuff. And that's where I'm at now. I still can delegate stuff if I take the time to train the people to do what I need them to do, which then gets back to this whole time thing. Time is really the most valuable asset you have. Your own mind, your spirit, your life experience, your story, and time. That's it. That's the stuff. So that was the cutting exercise, which I zipped through faster than I thought I would. Any of you have any comments or questions? Do you feel like you're getting it? And do you feel like this is something you could do? Because my goal for this particular training is to throw out a real life example, take you through it enough so that you could kind of see how you do it, and then really encourage you to take a little time and do this. If you have a spouse, work it with your spouse. Becky and I work together. We function in the organization, so what I do affects her, and every now and then just revisiting what we're doing and how we're doing it to make space for each other, for personal ministry, personal refreshment. So I'm not seeing any comments or questions. I'm trusting that you're all on board with it. So I'm going to probably end this early. This is probably going to be a shorter presentation. And if a question comes to mind, if you want me to revisit something, go back and look at something, just shoot us a chat you have in your GoToMeeting window, and we'll do that. But I'm going to move on and review the resources that are available to you. And Necessary Endings by Henry Cloud, recommend that book. I would also tuck in fact, let me just do this. Since we're on Henry Cloud, his book, Boundaries for Leaders, is a really good book as well. And so I'll just have that on the site. As again, it's not just his old Boundaries book rehashed. It's really, really an excellent preparation. And so just for those of you that are in our area, what did I do? Let me back up. I hit the wrong something. If you are in Tidewater area, Hampton Roads, Southeast Virginia, we're doing, Dr. Bonnie Erb has workshops coming up in April. Contact us for that. All of my training that I've been doing, I think except for one that we didn't record, are on YouTube. You can look at Paul VanValin or Good Shepherd, tuck Good Shepherd into this title so it can be searched with the same engines. You can reach us directly at the website, moretraining@edencounseling.com. And from there, if you lose my email, you can click on it and get back to us. But for anybody who's interested in having the resources we have, you can't find them online, you're getting lost, I would recommend you feel free to contact me or, did it again, or Mirabella. So let me, I know I need to do this. Okay, so let me put Mirabella in here as well, because if you're doing this online, she'll get to you faster than I do. If I don't recognize who you are, for those of you that may be picking this up, and we do have some folks that are following us online, that would be useful. And then let me just cut this out and move it on to the next one. So this is how I do stuff, make it up as we go, right? So either contacting Mirabella or me directly anytime for whatever questions, we're fine to do that. So I saw some thanks. So it is more clear to you. Thanks for the input, Carnell. Thanks for the feedback. That's great. And so another thing I want you to do, Mirabella will be sending out, so this isn't a topic, but I'm going to plug this in anyway. I'm going to be in New York City in May. Becky and I will be in New York City. For those of you that are in New York, if you want to make contact, we have a conference consultation planned with my friend Tom Nolan, but we have some other time available. And if you were interested in having us participate in ministry or just get together, we'll be up there during that window of time. So I'm just letting you know about that. But topics we have covered. You're going to get a Survey Monkey, those of you that participate. I really would like you to fill it out, and I would like you to consider what we have been through together and what you'd like. And there's room to add that to this. So we've done training on marriage and family, communication, conflict resolution, personality differences, spent two sessions on that, stress and burnout, critical stress, which are those sort of potentially traumatic stress, and trauma itself. All that we've covered. And so sometimes, when you get these surveys, you don't think, I don't know what I'd like to request. So I thought I'd maybe kind of try to spice that up a bit. So I just thought of this morning, and there are a whole lot more topics, but between the Eden Leaders coaching team, which consists of Tom Nolan, who you met last week, me, Bob Groves, who is an expert in organization and management. He's a John Maxwell trained coach, and Dr. Richard Kidd, who's one of the smartest guys I know and just has some great stuff to teach about discipling and mentoring, and are some topics here. So looking at where we're at in life, so if you're a young person, how do I make sure that I start well toward finishing well? If I'm in midlife, that's a whole big topic. When you're in the middle, Bill Hybels said in his satellite conference a couple years ago, that's where the danger is. When you start out something, you're excited, you're exuberant. At the end, you see the end in sight. In the middle is when things start cracking up. So we certainly could look at that. And so I'm seeing some response to that. Yeah, feel free to react right now. That's great. Thanks. So organizational excellence, we have a whole lot we could look at here. How to create clear standards of performance. How to clearly define our mission, vision, and values. And then the whole area of development. Some of you are in nonprofit environments. How do we fundraise? If you're in a for-profit environment, how do we really strategically plan to grow from an economic as well as numeric standpoint while maintaining quality? So that's always an issue. Building healthy infrastructure. So when you're growing, healthy infrastructure first, so your growth is controlled and you end up with a healthy organization. we're often playing catch up. We just happen to hit a growth spurt, and pretty soon we're like drowning. And then all kinds of issues pertaining to relationship, communication, and boundaries. All are certainly possible. So how to incorporate training into daily work activity, that's an ongoing challenge. And those of you whose spouses work together, could be a family-run business, could be a ministry, lots to say about that. And then the whole concept of Sabbath, which relates to having margin and time. How do we, particularly those of you who are in ministry, most people think of the Sabbath as Sunday. But if you're in ministry, you pack your Sunday full of stuff. Maybe you take a nap, maybe you watch a little TV, but that isn't really Sabbath. So those are all topics that we could kick around. I've already heard a vote for life phases. We accept all input. We think there's value. If anybody is interested in something, we usually are willing to pursue it. So thank you for your time today. We're a lot shorter. Buzzed right through this. Again, if you have any questions or comments, get back to me. Be happy to assist with this. This is how you can reach us once again, anytime, any place. So have a great day. I will be back next month, very likely to talk maybe about various phases of life. If there's a particular phase you want us to address, let us know. There's a lot to be said about everyone. God bless. Bye-bye.